Welcome to the Hobby School podcast. Whether you're a seasoned hobbyist or just getting started, Hobby School is the perfect place to learn something new. My name is Dr. Destiny Kopp, and I'm your host of the podcast. But before we jump into our episode for today, the only thing I ask is that if you enjoyed the episode, please share with a friend and give us an honest review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps us get out the content to more people. I also want to invite you to get on our wait list for our next Hobby School Online Learning Summit. These are free to attend, and you can find the link to join at hobbyschool.com, which is also in our podcast show notes. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. And my special guest today is Kathi Rodgers with Oak Hill Homestead. Kathi is a lifelong homesteader at heart. She truly believes that home is where your garden is. Decades of experience with gardening, goats, and chickens has given her the passion to help others enjoy gardening as organically as possible. On her website, you'll find gardening advice, tips on living a simple, healthy life, and encouragement to keep you going when times get hard. Kathi, I am super excited to chat with you today. We're going to be talking about how to get started growing vegetables and herbs in containers. And I'm interested in this conversation myself personally, and I know the listeners are. So I'm super excited to chat with you. And why don't you get started by telling the audience a little bit more about you and how you help people?
All right. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I have a passion for helping people get started with gardening, with growing their own food, even if it's just tomatoes, which is, was my main reason for gardening for many, many years. I just love tomatoes, and they're not nearly as good from the grocery store. So I have a blog. It has, as you said, lots of advice for beginning gardeners, and I just want to help people get started. That's my main thing.
Well, tell me a little bit about, we're going to be talking about growing vegetables and herbs in containers. Do you prefer like growing vegetables and flowers and stuff in containers, and I don't even know what to call it. This shows you how much I know about this topic, or just like out in a garden that's in your yard? What's the difference there? Tell us a little bit about what's the difference.
Okay. The difference is, for instance, my husband was career military, so we moved at least every 2 years. I stopped counting at 30 major moves. We have been everywhere. Most of those places, I did not have the opportunity to garden in the ground. It just, was not possible, whether we were in an apartment or in military housing, or even if we rented a house, it was not ours and we couldn't dig up the grass. The landlord probably wouldn't have liked that. So containers were it for a long time. And actually even houseplants indoors was the best I could do for quite some time. But after that, I just, I gardened as much as I could in containers wherever we were, gave my plants away when we moved, got more when we got settled again. It gave me that opportunity to be out with plants outside, balcony, porch, whatever. It just gave me that connection with nature that I really, really craved. And after he left the military, retired, he became a pastor for several years. So we kept on moving. Fortunately, we had parsonages by that time, so that it was a little easier. And sometimes I would inherit an asparagus patch that somebody had planted years before, a little chive plant by the front steps, perhaps, that somebody had planted before. I fell in love with hollyhocks, a flower, at one house, because there was the most beautiful garden. I'd never seen them before. They were just beautiful. And one time I actually inherited an actual in-the-ground garden, which was just such a blessing. I enjoyed that one so much. Now that we have our own place, our own home, I am gardening outside because I do have the room to do that, but I have a raised bed garden rather than gardening in the ground. Oklahoma's soil is not the greatest in the world, not like up in Michigan where we used to live, where you had this lovely black dirt and it rained all the time and I hardly ever had to even water. Here it's a bit of a struggle with the bugs and the drought and the heat and bad soil and all of that. But I'm trying. I'm still out there doing it. And what I don't have room to grow in my raised beds, I have in pots on our patio. So I'm still growing in containers, even though I have that outside.
And what I'm hearing from that is really anybody could do this, whether you live in the city, an apartment, or, you're renting a home, anybody can, grow vegetables and herbs in containers.
That's right. Anybody can, just about anywhere. You might have a sunny windowsill that you could put pots of herbs. You might have a patio or a balcony in an apartment. You could garden there. Like you said, a rental house, that gardening in containers in a rental house is really the best way to do it. And you have some space, but you can't put them in the ground. So just put your containers out there. People do a lot of gardening in flowers in containers, but I don't think many people really think that you can grow vegetables in containers, but you can.
So do you need, and I'm kind of thinking through this because a lot of the listeners, they might not have, even if they have a yard, it might be a very small yard or, a very small patio. How much space do you need to grow vegetables, to put together a vegetable garden in containers?
Right. It depends on what you want to grow, partly. Some things are a little harder to grow in a small space. For instance, corn, if you want to grow corn, that you see pictures of corn growing in rows, but actually the best way to plant corn is in a block. So like 6 rows of 6 plants, because it's wind pollinated. So the wind has to get in there and move pollen from one plant to another. So that might be a little bit harder to do if you have a small patio or something, and it does get very tall, but you could do it if you were really serious about doing it. Another thing that might be hard to grow in containers on a small space would be pumpkins or squash or melons, winter squash. Those vines can grow up to 25 feet long. So that would take up a lot of space. But you can grow smaller things, a smaller melon, or for instance, bush cucumbers instead of vining cucumbers so that they don't take up as much room. You probably won't be able to grow every vegetable that your family eats, but you can grow your favorites. You can grow something that tastes so much better when it's fresh grown than it is from the grocery store, like tomatoes, as I said. You can grow what is on the Dirty Dozen list. That's a list that's put out by the Environmental Working Group that has the 10 most dangerous plants to eat from the store because of the residue of herbicide and pesticide. Strawberries are number 1 and have been for several years. So I have strawberries growing in containers. And to me, that's important because I don't want to be eating that. If it was, let's say it was an orange. Okay, you peel the peel off the orange. So you're not necessarily eating the pesticides that are on it. But something like a strawberry or a tomato or something like that, you are eating that skin and you really can't wash that off enough for my peace of mind anyway. You could wash it, but I don't know if you really got it all off. So to me, those are important things to grow. So it just depends on what you want to grow, how much space you have. You don't need a lot of space for most plants.
Well,
just those big ones that I was talking about.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me, to my next question. And that is, you mentioned some of the Dirty Dozen, but how do I really decide, what to grow if I'm just getting started? I've never done this before. And I'll put myself in this category because I'm one of these people. I've never done anything like this before. Where would I start? What would I start with?
Okay. I would start by writing down what you like to eat. Because if you don't like okra, you don't want to grow okra. Why would you? You're not going to eat it. Strawberries, if you love strawberries, that's something you probably would like to grow. I suggest you make a list of all the foods that you and your family would love to have right outside the back door. And by the way, I was just looking over at my kitchen. There's too many bowls of tomatoes and cucumbers over there for me to even count. So it's nice to have it right out there. Write down this list of all of the things that you would like to grow. And once you have got them all down, and like I said, things that you would eat, once you do that, go through, kind of decide how much room those things need. You may not have room for corn. You may not have room for watermelon, which is another long vine, but you could fit in some lettuce and onions and radishes, make a little salad garden. That wouldn't take up much space. Strawberries, and I have a trick for strawberries that I can tell you about, how to fit as many in as you possibly can. Those would be good to grow. Let's see, tomatoes. Those are something that I have always enjoyed growing. And whatever it is that's on that list that you are the most interested in, that you have the room for, that will grow well in your climate, those are the ones that you should start out with.
Well, you mentioned it, but what's the tip for strawberries? Because now I want to know.
Now you want to know.
Now I want to know.
Strawberries have a very small root system, and they are so easy to grow in rain gutters. You know, the gutter you have along the roof of your house.
Wow. Yes.
You
We
can,
definitely have those.
you can buy those from the home improvement store. You can put a cap on each end. You can hang them on your balcony railing in several rows. A row, a row, another row of strawberries, and you have fit that many strawberry plants into that space. They're just very easy to grow in a small area.
Wow, I love that tip. Well, and that kind of brings me to my next question is, what if I don't have a sunny space or, the containers, what kind of containers? And I like your tip about the rain gutters for the strawberries.
Mhm.
What would you use for some of the other plants?
When I first sat down and made that list myself and thought of all the things that I wanted to plant, and I nearly had a heart attack at how much I was afraid it was going to cost to buy all those containers if I went to the store to buy them. Pots are expensive, but you can think outside the box. You can use what you have. I'm sure that you have driven around in your lifetime and noticed a bathtub on somebody's front yard that was full of flowers, or a wheelbarrow that was full of flowers. Those are just things that people had that were handy to plant in. Those are containers, by the way. A bathtub is a container, if you think about it.
Okay.
If you
I
think
didn't
about
know.
it. Sure. And it even
Interesting.
has a drain hole in it, which is, it's already there. It's wonderful. Not that your neighbors might appreciate it, but it does work. So whatever you have around, it might be pots that the nursery pots that you bought trees in last year and planted. It might be, let's see, Rubbermaid totes you can actually plant in. The bins that you store things in, put some holes in the bottom of those. Those work. Cat litter buckets, 5-gallon buckets. Let's see what I've got out there. I have
Is the key that you just have to have the drainage system in whatever you're using?
Yes, that is a very key point. If it doesn't have holes in it, put holes in it.
Okay.
You can either drill with a power drill, or you can chisel a hole in it with a nail, just hammer a nail into it to make a hole. If it's plastic, like the Rubbermaid totes, you can use a soldering gun to make holes. It heats up, it melts the plastic.
And what would you use for the I guess dirt or potting soil? I'm not sure what you're calling it. What would you use for that?
That will also depend on how many containers you need to fill. Dirt's expensive. I found that out this year. We moved last year, so I had to start my garden all over again. And we made raised beds and filled all those up. And golly, that soil was expensive. You can go to the home improvement store. You can buy potting soil that will work. It's a little more expensive, or raised bed soil, topsoil. Whatever you buy, it's good to mix in some compost, which also comes in bags, or peat moss or cow manure, or whatever. The more organic material that you can get into that soil, the better your plants will grow. So just be aware that you should not buy just one kind of topsoil and put that all in there. It will work, but you're going to have to do a lot of fertilizing, and I don't like fertilizing. I try to do this as organically as possible. So if you happen to have acreage like we did at one time, you can go out and clean out the horse barn and use that. That worked really well.
Or maybe a neighbor who might have that.
Right. I still have friends who have cattle. So, there's that source of compost right there. Let's see. Containers again. We were talking about those. I have some large rubber feed tubs from the Farm and Fleet type store, Tractor Supply, that kind of place, that are probably 2 to 3 feet in diameter. And we used, my husband used his drill and put holes in that for me. That's where my strawberries are growing in. And those are pretty inexpensive. So for containers, I would look around, see what you have, think outside the box, ask your friends and family what they might have that you could have. Just grow in whatever you can. Actually, you'll love this one. I'm growing sweet potatoes in cardboard boxes this year.
Oh, wow. I never would have guessed that. Okay.
They're very heavy duty cardboard boxes. Supposedly they will last the season. So we will find out. It's an experiment. We'll see.
So I have one last question before we
Okay.
hang up here today, and this will kind of tell you about my ignorance of the subject. Since we're growing in containers, do we have to, I know that, there's a season for strawberries, there's a season to grow, maybe sweet potatoes, maybe, I don't know. But, can you grow all year round? Let's just say I wanted to grow tomatoes all year round. Can I do that because I'm doing it in a container, or is there a certain time that I would need to plant something, certain type of vegetables?
If you were growing indoors, you could grow all year round. Otherwise, it depends on where you live and what your climate is. Oklahoma, of course, is super hot during the summer, but it does get cold in the winter and plants will die over the winter. So I cannot grow year round. Florida, California, those sort of places, you can probably grow year round. Up north, you could not. So it just depends on where you are. As you said, there are seasons for different things. Now, the strawberries are perennial, which means that they will grow, they stay alive. I won't say they'll grow year round because they're dormant during the winter, but they will come back in the spring. So it just, like I said, depends on what you're growing and where you live.
Okay. Well, Kathi, thank you so much for all the tips that you gave us today on how to get started with growing vegetables and herbs in containers. Can you tell people where they can find you if they want to go get a little bit more information about this topic?
Sure. On my website, oakhillhomestead.com, we have lots of information about gardening and other aspects of homesteading if you're interested in that, about living frugally and a healthy life. I'm also on Facebook, Oak Hill Homestead, and Instagram, Oak Hill Homestead.
Okay. And do you have a gift for the listeners?
I do. I have a short guide to container gardening, and that will be free at my website.
And I will make sure, we'll make sure that those links are in the show notes.
I was hoping you would.
All of the links, yes. So you don't have to tell them what the link is.
Okay.
We'll make sure that all the links to find Kathi's website and the free gift that she has for you will be on our website and a link in the show notes so you can grab it there. Thank you, Kathi. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love chatting with you. And now I am inspired to start gardening in containers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening today. Don't forget to sign up for the wait list so you'll be the first to know when our next free HobbyScool online learning summit launches. The link is in the show notes for this episode, or you can go to hobbyschool.com, and that's HobbyScool with school without an H in it. Talk soon.